It was supposed to be just another glamorous night in New York, a star-studded event, cameras flashing, champagne flowing. Ciara had arrived looking every inch the R&B queen, glowing under the lights and mingling effortlessly with industry royalty. But somewhere between the photo ops and the VIP chatter, a moment unfolded that no one saw coming. One that's now echoing through every corner of hip-hop and reality TV gossip. Witnesses say Ciara, with that signature mix of elegance and authority, walked straight up to Jim Jones and dropped a bombshell in front of everyone within earshot. It's time. You need to marry Chrissy. No small talk, no build-up, just a demand that hit the room like a thunderclap. Those standing nearby swear you could feel the air shift instantly. Jim froze, his expression caught between surprise and disbelief. For years, fans have watched Jim and Chrissy's on-again, off-again engagement saga play out on national television, turning into one of the most infamous relationship cliffhangers in hip-hop history. And now, here was Ciara, an outsider to their love story, but a powerhouse in her own right, stepping in and calling him out publicly. What happened next? That's where things get messy. Jim didn't stay silent, and his response wasn't what anyone expected. Some say it was defensive, others call it brutally honest. Either way, it sparked an uproar, pulling Chrissy into the center of a storm she never asked for. And the deeper you dig, the more explosive this confrontation becomes. The confrontation between Ciara and Jim Jones didn't happen in some quiet corner. It unfolded in the center of one of the most high-profile industry events of the year, with cameras rolling and enough witnesses to guarantee it would explode across social media before the night was over. It was the kind of gathering where everyone knew everyone, where rivalries were tucked behind polite smiles, and where the unspoken rule was to keep the real drama off the floor. Ciara shattered that rule in a matter of seconds. Multiple guests have confirmed that Ciara had been working the room all evening, greeting friends, posing for photos, and even slipping into a few whispered conversations with executives and fellow artists. But according to a source close to the situation, she had one very specific stop planned on her rounds that night, and it was straight toward Jim Jones. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more dangerous. Jim had just wrapped up a conversation with two producers when Ciara approached, her eyes locked on him like she had rehearsed this moment in her head. There was no easing into it. Ciara reportedly said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "It's time you stop playing games, marry Chrissy." The words hung in the air, heavy, deliberate. People froze mid-sip, mid-step. Even the background music seemed to fade for a split second. Jim, who was rarely caught off guard in public, looked stunned. He blinked, his mouth twitching into something between a smirk and a frown, like he couldn't decide whether to laugh it off or take it as a challenge. One witness swears that Chrissy, who had been across the room chatting with a small group, noticed instantly that something was happening. Her smile slipped and she began making her way over before stopping halfway, perhaps deciding to see how Jim would handle it without her stepping in. It was as though the entire room was now suspended between curiosity and tension. Jim's first response wasn't verbal, it was in his body language. He leaned back slightly, crossed his arms, and gave Ciara a look that screamed, "Do you really want to do this here?" But Ciara didn't back down. 14 years, she added, her voice even but firm. You've kept her waiting long enough. That statement hit harder than the initial demand. Everyone knew exactly what she was referencing, the long, drawn-out engagement between Jim and Chrissy that had become one of the most talked-about sagas in reality TV over the years. Chrissy had been open about wanting marriage, about wanting that commitment to be sealed in more than just words. Viewers had seen her propose to Jim herself on Love and Hip Hop, only to watch the proposal sit in limbo for years. Every season seemed to promise a resolution, but instead, the storyline just kept looping: fights, reconciliations, hints at wedding plans, and then nothing. Fans were invested, frustrated, and at times openly critical of Jim for not following through. Ciara's words tapped directly into that long-standing frustration. Jim finally responded, his voice low but sharp. "That's between me and Chrissy," he said, according to one source. But Ciara didn't miss a beat. "Then make it between you and her. Stop making it public by dragging it out in front of the world." That line was bold, almost accusatory, and it shifted the energy yet again. Okay? Now, it wasn't just a conversation about marriage. It was a commentary on how Jim had handled the entire relationship in the public eye. People close enough to hear describe Jim's face tightening, his jaw clenching. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so it didn't carry as far. But those standing nearby still caught fragments. Something about not being told what to do and not needing someone else's timeline. Ciara stood her ground, hands lightly clasped in front of her, expression calm but unyielding. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't being dramatic, she was cutting straight to the point. And that, according to witnesses, made it even more uncomfortable for Jim. The awkwardness spread through the crowd like wildfire. Conversations faltered as more people turned to watch. Even the event photographer lingered nearby, camera half raised. Clearly aware that whatever was happening was bigger than the usual celebrity banter. Chrissy still hadn't joined them, but her eyes were fixed on the exchange, her posture stiff. Like she was bracing for something. Then Jim delivered the first part of what would become his shocking response. He reportedly told Ciara that people didn't understand the layers of his relationship with Chrissy. That they had an understanding that didn't need to fit into anyone else's definition of commitment. "We're good how we are," he said dismissively. But before Ciara could reply, he added a pointed question. "Why are you so worried about my business? Who sent you?" The "who sent you" line was the one that lit up the gossip blogs. It implied that Ciara wasn't speaking for herself, but perhaps on behalf of someone, maybe even Chrissy. Within hours, theories popped up online that Chrissy had confided in Ciara about her frustrations, and Ciara had decided to take matters into her own hands. Others believed Ciara was just fed up as a friend and as a woman watching another woman wait too long for the respect she deserved. What made the exchange even more intriguing was that Jim didn't stop there. According to another witness, he leaned in slightly and said something that made Ciara raise her eyebrows in surprise. "There's things about me and Chrissy you don't know. If you did, you'd understand why we're not rushing anything." That cryptic remark has since become the subject of endless speculation. What could he have meant? Was it about personal issues, trust, financial matters, or something else entirely? The moment ended as abruptly as it began. Jim shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked away, leaving Ciara standing there with a kind of composure that suggested she had expected resistance. Chrissy remained across the room, never closing the distance, but when Jim reached her, witnesses say she looked him dead in the eye, said nothing, and then walked away herself. That brief, wordless exchange between the couple was almost more telling than the conversation with Ciara. By the time the event wrapped up, the incident was already the night's biggest talking point. Attendees were texting their friends, gossip sites were drafting posts, and hashtags were beginning to trend. People weren't just debating whether Ciara was right or wrong to confront Jim. They were dissecting Jim's evasive, defensive reaction and wondering what exactly was hiding behind his carefully guarded words. What nobody knew then was that this wasn't the end of the story. Jim's shocking response wasn't finished, would spill over into the following days, with both Ciara and Chrissy being pulled deeper into a conversation that was about to go public in a way none of them had planned. The night after the event, whispers had already turned into full-blown headlines. Every gossip blog from New York to LA had some version of the story, each one spinning it differently. Some framed Ciara as the hero who finally said what everyone had been thinking. Others painted her as overstepping, meddling in a relationship that wasn't hers. But no matter which side people took, One thing was clear: Jim's cryptic remark about there being things you don't know had lit a fire of curiosity that was spreading fast. It didn't help that by the next morning, a short, shaky cell phone video from the confrontation had leaked online. The clip didn't capture every word, but you could clearly see Ciara gesturing slightly with her hands as she said, "14 years is too long." You could also hear Jim's voice respond, "That's between me and her," before leaning in to deliver the line about things you don't know. The video was only 30 seconds long, but it was enough to send social media into overdrive. On Twitter, fans dissected every frame like it was evidence in a criminal case. "Look at Jim's face when she says marry her," one user wrote, circling a freeze frame of his clenched jaw. Another slowed down the clip to analyze Chrissy's reaction in the background, claiming she looked hurt but unsurprised. Theories multiplied, some believing Jim had no intention of ever marrying Chrissy. Others convinced he was holding out for a reason that would make sense if it ever came to light. Then, in a move that shocked even the most dedicated gossip watchers, Chrissy herself posted on Instagram. Wasn't a rant, it wasn't a denial, it was a photo. In it, she was sitting on a beach, sunglasses on, holding a glass of wine. The caption read, "I'm good. No tags, no explanation." Fans flooded the comments, reading into every pixel. Was she signaling that she was unbothered? Or was it a quiet way of saying she'd given up on expecting marriage altogether? Meanwhile, Ciara was holding her own ground. She didn't speak publicly about the confrontation, but she liked several posts that praised her for holding Jim accountable. This was all the internet needed to assume that she stood by every word she had said that night. Some insiders claimed Ciara had spoken to Chrissy after the event, assuring her that the conversation had come from a place of love and respect. Whether Chrissy appreciated it was another story. The real fuel for the fire came 2 days later, when an anonymous industry source spoke to a major entertainment site. They claimed Jim and Chrissy's relationship had been through more ups and downs than the public realized, and hinted at private struggles that went beyond cold feet. They wouldn't elaborate, but their comments lined up suspiciously well with Jim's own vague warning to Ciara. Around the same time, another rumor started making the rounds, this one alleging that Jim's hesitation to marry Chrissy was tied to financial issues. According to this theory, there were business entanglements and property disputes that made marriage more complicated than it seemed on the surface. Some even speculated about prenups and trust funds, painting a picture of a relationship where love wasn't the only factor at play. Jim didn't address the rumors directly, but he did post a cryptic story on Instagram, a close-up photo of his sneakers with the caption, "Moving how I move." It was as if he was doubling down on the idea that nobody was going to pressure him into a decision, no matter how public the call-out. But for every supporter who applauded his independence, there were twice as many critics calling it a deflection. By now, the conversation had grown far beyond Ciara's confrontation. Talk shows were weighing in. Podcasts were dedicating entire episodes to the saga. And relationship experts were chiming in about the dangers of dragging out an engagement for over a decade. Every clip from Love and Hip Hop featuring Jim and Chrissy was being recirculated, reanalyzed, and recontextualized. Viewers pointed out moments when Chrissy had seemed ready to walk away, only to stay. Others resurfaced Jim's old interviews where he had spoken about marriage in vague, non-committal terms. In the middle of all this, a surprising ally stepped forward. Mama Jones, known for never holding her tongue, Jim's mother, gave an interview where she admitted she liked Ciara's energy, but also cautioned people against thinking they knew the whole story. "Marriage is more than a wedding dress and a ring," she said. "There's things people don't see, and my son is a man who moves when he's ready." Coming from her, it was both a defense of Jim and an acknowledgement that Ciara's words had weight. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. A leaked audio clip allegedly from a private conversation between Jim and a close friend. In it, Jim's voice can be heard saying, "I love her, but I ain't gonna let anybody push me into that, not even her. If I do it, it's gotta be on my terms. The friend asks if that means he doesn't see it happening soon, and Jim's response is a low chuckle followed by soon's a relative word. The leak ignited another wave of outrage. Fans accused Jim of stringing Chrissy along while others defended him, arguing that marriage should happen when both people are ready, not under pressure. But even his defenders admitted the relative comment didn't sound promising. Chrissy stayed silent through it all, posting only a photo of her dog with the caption, "My peace." Ciara, on the other hand, seemed to get bolder. Unrelated event a few days later. A reporter asked if she regretted confronting Jim. She smiled, shook her head, and said, "Sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be said." With both women standing firm and Jim continuing to dodge direct answers, the situation had reached a strange stalemate. The public had more questions than answers, and every new rumor added another layer to the mystery. But behind the scenes, sources claimed tensions between Jim and Chrissy had hit a breaking point after the confrontation. They were still together, but the pressure was mounting, and if the whispers were true, something big was coming that could either force Jim's hand or end the relationship for good. The only certainty was that the saga wasn't over. In fact, for those watching closely, it felt like the real story hadn't even started yet. The stalemate didn't last long. Just when it seemed the confrontation might fade into the usual cycle of gossip fatigue, Jim Jones reignited the fire himself. MAHL fun. His own terms. It happened during a live radio interview meant to promote his latest music project. But the moment the host slid in a question about Ciara's demand, Jim's entire demeanor shifted. Smirk returned, but this time it carried an edge. "Look," he began, leaning toward the mic, "I respect Ciara. She's a queen in her lane. But my relationship is mine. It's not a storyline for anybody else's entertainment, and it's not up for public votes. Me and Chrissy, we've been through more than people can imagine. Marriage don't make us real, we already real." The words were calm, but the undertone was defensive, almost daring anyone to challenge him. The host pushed gently, asking if he understood why some fans and even friends felt Chrissy had waited too long. Jim didn't hesitate. Everybody loves to play judge and jury from the outside. But nobody's in our house when the lights are off. Nobody's there when it's just me and her figuring out life. If I marry Chrissy, it's because I wake up one morning and say, "This is the day," not because somebody cornered me at a party. It was a pointed reference to Ciara, and he knew it. But then he dropped the part that would have everyone talking for weeks. "And to be real, there's things between me and Chrissy that ain't ready for marriage yet. I'm not gonna stand here and pretend like everything's perfect just to give people a wedding. I'd rather work through it than fake it for the cameras." The room went silent for a beat before the host asked if that meant there were problems in the relationship. Jim gave a slow nod. "Every couple's got problems. Ours are just louder because people love to watch. But some of our stuff, it's deep. We've got trust to rebuild. And I'm not putting a ring on top of a crack in the foundation." The honesty was disarming, but it was also explosive. Within hours, clips of the interview were everywhere. Some fans praised Jim for refusing to cave to pressure, calling his stance realistic and mature. Others tore into him, accusing him of hiding behind vague excuses to avoid committing. Relationship experts were invited onto talk shows to debate whether his reasoning was valid or just another delay tactic. Ciara, for her part, didn't fire back publicly, but she did post a short message on her Instagram story later that night. "Sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes it heals." No mention of Jim, but everyone knew. Chrissy stayed silent, but her absence from Jim's promotional events that week didn't go unnoticed. Paparazzi caught her out with friends. No engagement. Ring visible? And while that didn't necessarily mean anything, it was enough to spark another round of, "Are they done?" Speculation. Then came the curveball nobody expected. A tabloid published a piece claiming an unnamed source close to Chrissy said she had been ready to walk away for good earlier this year, but stayed after Jim promised they'd take concrete steps toward marriage in 2024. If that was true, Ciara's confrontation might not have been as spontaneous as it seemed. It could have been a calculated nudge to remind Jim of that promise. The tabloid also hinted at financial disagreements, echoing earlier rumors from Part 2. Allegedly, Chrissy wanted certain assets protected before marrying, while Jim was resistant to the idea of prenuptial agreements. The claim was unverified, but it added a layer of complexity that fit perfectly with Jim's comments about things that ain't ready for marriage yet. In the days that followed, the pressure cooker only got hotter. Fans began tagging Chrissy in wedding dress posts. Others flooded Jim's comments with ring emojis. Every old clip from Love and Hip Hop showing their romance and their fights was resurfacing. Talk shows were openly betting on whether they'd ever make it down the aisle. And then, just as the noise reached its peak, Chrissy broke her silence. She appeared at a charity gala, looking flawless, smiling for photos. But when a reporter asked about Jim's interview, she paused, tilted her head, and said, "I think everybody's got an opinion on what I should do." It was a subtle but powerful statement, one that left people wondering if she was hinting at an exit. Social media exploded with interpretations, with some calling it empowerment and others seeing it as a farewell disguised in diplomacy. The final twist came a week later when a behind-the-scenes clip leaked from that original event where Ciara confronted Jim. In the grainy video, after Jim walked away, Ciara was caught talking to another guest, saying she deserves better. And if he's not going to give it to her, she should give it to herself. The line was raw, unfiltered, and it reignited the fire all over again, whether Ciara had overstepped or simply spoken. A truth Chrissy already knew was now the debate of the moment. But one thing was certain. Jim's shocking response hadn't ended the conversation, it had cracked it wide open. The public was now more invested than ever, and the pressure on Jim to either take that final step or face the fallout was greater than it had been in years. For Jim, the path forward was a tightrope. Any sign of wavering could be interpreted as weakness, any sign of digging in could be seen as selfishness. For Chrissy, it was about deciding how much longer she was willing to stand in the waiting room of a promise. And for Ciara, it was about watching from the sidelines as her intervention continued to ripple through their lives. What happens next might not just define Jim and Chrissy's relationship, could change the way fans see them forever. If another public moment like that confrontation happens, the next chapter might not just be a conversation. Might be the end or the beginning of something entirely new. If you think this saga is slowing down, think again, because everything we've seen so far might just be the prelude to the real story. Ciara's bold confrontation lit a fire that hasn't stopped burning. Jim's cryptic admissions have left the public with more questions than answers, and Chrissy's measured silence is only adding to the tension. At this point, the next move could change everything, either cementing this as one of hip-hop's most enduring love stories or closing the book for good. So where do you stand? Was Ciara right to step in and push Jim toward marriage, or should she have stayed out of it? Do you believe Jim's reasoning about not being ready and protecting the foundation, or is it just another delay tactic? And perhaps the biggest question, what does Chrissy really want now that all eyes are on her next decision? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me if you're Team Ciara, Team Jim, or Team Chrissy, and why. And don't just comment. Make sure you hit that like button to let the algorithm know this is the conversation everyone needs to be part of. Subscribe and turn on all notifications, because the moment there's an update, whether it's a wedding, date, a breakup announcement, or another public showdown, you'll hear it here first, with every unfiltered detail and every piece of behind-the-scenes tea the blogs won't dare to spill. This isn't just relationship drama. It's a cultural moment. Don't just watch it happen. Be here when it changes everything.